For years, Lana Davis has endured unspeakable cruelty behind the gilded walls of the Davenport mansion. To the outside world, they are a model family, but behind closed doors, they hide secrets darker than anyone could imagine. Beaten, abused, and caged like an animal, Lana has been stripped of her dignity, forced to obey the whims of her powerful employers. But when she uncovers the Davenports' darkest secrets, proof of corruption, abuse, and betrayal, Lana seizes her one chance for freedom. Risking everything, she joins forces with an unlikely ally to expose the truth. As the powerful family's empire begins to unravel, Lana must outsmart the Davenports before they silence her for good. In a world where the powerful prey on the powerless, one woman's courage could change everything. But will Lana's quest for justice set her free, or will it cost her everything she holds dear? Based on a true story. Before we dive into this powerful story, let us know where you're tuning in from, and if you find it compelling, don't forget to hit subscribe. The air in the cramped cage was thick with the stale scent of rust and dampness. Lana Davis shivered as the early morning chill seeped through the bars, biting into her skin. The cage was barely large enough for her to stretch her legs, yet it had been her prison for what felt like an eternity. She tried to adjust her position, but her aching muscles protested with a sharp pain. The cold metal floor sent a jolt through her body whenever she shifted, reminding her of her place in this house, beneath even the family's pampered pets. Outside the cage, the Davenport mansion was coming to life. She could hear the clatter of Winter Davenport's expensive heels on the marble floors, the shrill laughter of her two daughters, and the low, grumbling voice of Mr. Mark. It was just another day in the household that had turned Lana's life into a living nightmare. Lana clenched her fists, trying to block out the sounds of the family starting their day, trying to push away the memories of how she ended up here. She'd once believed this job would be her salvation. After losing her parents and struggling to make ends meet, working for a wealthy family seemed like a blessing. But the moment she stepped into the Davenport mansion, she realized that her fate had been sealed. Winter Davenport, with her perfectly manicured nails and icy demeanor, had taken one look at Lana and decided she was nothing more than an animal. A dog. Fit only to serve, and, when not needed, to be locked away like one. Mark Davenport, with his predatory gaze, had wasted no time taking advantage of her. At first, Lana had tried to resist, but the more she fought back, the worse the punishments became. Her mind drifted to the countless nights she spent caged like a wild beast, her body aching from Mark's assaults, her ears ringing from Winter's verbal abuse. The daughters, Olivia and Vanessa, were no better. They enjoyed making her beg for scraps of food, treating her suffering as a game. Today, as the first rays of light slipped through the tiny window above her cage, Lana pressed her forehead against the cold bars, feeling the weight of another day pressing down on her. She could hear Winter barking orders to the other staff, her voice dripping with condescension. A wave of nausea hit Lana as she thought about what awaited her upstairs. A sudden clang jolted her out of her thoughts. The door to the basement swung open, and Winter's voice echoed down the staircase. "Get up, you lazy bitch," she screamed. Lana scrambled to her knees, her heart racing. She had learned the hard way that any delay would earn her a slap or worse. Winter's sharp figure appeared at the top of the stairs. Her eyes were as cold as the diamond necklace resting on her chest. "Mr. Mark wants you upstairs." "Now," she hissed, unlocking the cage with a disdainful flick of her wrist. "And don't you dare keep him waiting." Lana's legs wobbled as she climbed out of the cage. The previous night's beating had left her ribs bruised, and every step sent a fresh wave of agony through her body. But she forced herself to straighten up. She knew better than to show weakness. Winter thrived on it. The house above was warm and luxurious, a stark contrast to the damp basement where she was kept. As she made her way down the grand hallway, Lana caught a glimpse of herself in one of the ornate mirrors. Her reflection was a stranger, a thin, hollow-eyed woman with bruises staining her dark skin. She quickly turned away. There was no use in dwelling on what she had become. Mark was waiting for her in his study. As Lana entered, she kept her eyes fixed on the floor, hoping to avoid his leering gaze. But Mark was never one to be ignored. He grabbed her by the arm, yanking her closer. "I've missed you, Lana," he whispered, his breath hot against her ear. "You've been such a good girl, haven't you?" Lana's stomach twisted in disgust, but she remained silent. She knew any response would only encourage him. Mark's grip tightened, and she winced, but still, she didn't move. She had learned to become a statue, to detach her mind from what was happening. When it was over, he shoved her away like a used napkin. "Get out of my sight," he muttered. "And don't forget to clean the guest rooms." Lana nodded, swallowing back her tears as she hurried out of the room. As she made her way to the servants' quarters, she overheard snippets of conversation between Winter and the girls. They were planning yet another lavish party, a celebration that would undoubtedly leave her cleaning up their messes long into the night. Lana's fingers curled into fists, her nails digging into her palms. How much longer could she endure this? The truth was, Lana had no choice. She was trapped, caged not just by iron bars but by the Davenports' power and influence. If she ran, where would she go? Who would believe her story? No one would take the word of a maid over the beloved Davenport family. That night, as she lay curled up in her cage, listening to the distant laughter of the family she served, Lana's thoughts drifted to the life growing inside her. The child she carried was a small, flickering hope that maybe, just maybe, she could escape this hell. She dreamt of running far away, of holding her baby in her arms, of finally being free. But as the days turned into weeks, Lana's secret would soon become impossible to hide. And when Winter Davenport discovered the truth, the fragile hope Lana clung to would be shattered in the most brutal way. Little did they know, though, that the broken woman in the cage was slowly gathering the strength to break free. And one day, they would all pay for what they had done to her. The morning light streamed through the narrow windows of the kitchen as Lana carefully prepared breakfast. Her hands shook slightly as she arranged the fine china on a silver tray. The bruises on her arms, remnants of Mark's assault earlier, ached with every movement. But Lana had learned long ago to push through the pain. In the Davenport mansion, there was no room for weakness. As she made her way down the grand hallway to Winter Davenport's private sitting room, Lana kept her eyes fixed on the ground. She knew her place in this house, out of sight, out of mind. But today, there was a sense of dread gnawing at her insides. Winter had been particularly harsh in recent weeks, her temper flaring over the smallest mistakes. And Lana couldn't afford to draw any more attention to herself. Not now. The door to Winter's sitting room was ajar, and Lana hesitated before pushing it open with her shoulder. Winter sat regally in her favorite chair, a silk robe draped around her slender frame. Her eyes, sharp and cold as ever, flicked up to meet Lana's as she entered. Without a word, Lana set the tray down on the low marble table, careful not to make a sound. Winter watched her with that same calculating gaze that made Lana's skin crawl. "You're late," she said, her voice smooth but dripping with contempt. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Lana whispered, keeping her head bowed. "It won't happen again." "It better not," Winter replied curtly, her eyes narrowing. Lana kept her focus on the tray, trying to ignore the intensity of Winter's stare. But she could feel it, like the woman was peeling back layers of her skin, searching for secrets buried underneath. Lana turned to leave, hoping to make a quiet escape, but Winter's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Stop." Lana froze, her heart thundering in her chest. She turned slowly to face Winter, who was now standing, her eyes locked on Lana's midsection. "What's going on with you?" Winter asked, her tone deceptively casual. "You've been looking rounder lately." Lana's breath caught in her throat. She had been careful to hide her growing belly, wearing loose clothes and keeping to the shadows, but there was no hiding from Winter's keen eyes. I'm not sure what you mean, ma'am," Lana stammered, desperately trying to keep her voice steady. Winter's expression darkened. In 2 quick strides, she closed the distance between them, her perfectly manicured fingers digging into Lana's arm. "Don't play dumb with me," Winter hissed, her voice a low growl. "You think I haven't noticed? Are you carrying his child?" Lana's eyes widened, her mind racing. She had hoped to keep her pregnancy a secret for as long as possible. But Winter's words confirmed her worst fear, she knew. Lana remained silent, knowing any answer would only fuel Winter's rage. "Answer me!" Winter screamed, her hand striking Lana across the face with a sharp crack. Lana stumbled back, tasting blood on her lip. Winter's eyes were wild with fury, her breaths coming in sharp bursts. "You disgusting little whore," she spat. "You think you can trap us with this thing growing inside you?" Lana shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. "No, ma'am," she whispered, choking back a sob. "I swear." "Enough." Winter's voice was a whip that cut through the air. "Get on your knees." With trembling hands, Lana obeyed, sinking to the cold, hard floor. Winter towered over her, her shadow casting Lana in darkness. "You really thought you could hide this from me?" she sneered. "Well, let me make one thing clear. You and that bastard child are nothing. Less than nothing." Winter's foot lashed out, connecting with Lana's stomach. Pain exploded through Lana's body, and she doubled over, clutching her belly as she gasped for breath. Winter kicked her again, her fury relentless. "I will not have a mongrel born under my roof," she hissed, punctuating each word with another kick. Lana's vision blurred as she crumpled to the ground, her hands instinctively protecting her abdomen. She could feel something inside her tearing, a searing pain that ripped through her core. The world seemed to spin, a haze of agony and despair. All she could hear was Winter's laughter, harsh and cruel, echoing in her ears. Eventually, Winter stopped, her breathing heavy. She leaned down, grabbing Lana's hair and jerking her head up. "Clean yourself up and get back to work," she said coldly. "You better pray no one finds out about your filthy secret, or you won't live to see tomorrow." Winter released her with a shove, and Lana collapsed to the floor, clutching her stomach in agony. She lay there for what felt like hours, curled into a ball, her tears soaking the cold marble floor. The child she had silently prayed would bring her hope, her escape, was gone. As the pain slowly began to subside, Lana realized that something had broken inside her, something deeper than just her body. She had lost her child, but in its place, a new resolve was growing. Lana's tears dried as she stared at the ceiling, her eyes empty, her heart hardened. Winter Davenport had taken everything from her. But there was one thing Lana still had, a quiet, burning rage that smoldered deep within her. And she would use that fire to bring down the Davenports, one way or another. Lana lay in the cage that had become her prison, curled up on the cold metal floor. The pain in her abdomen had subsided into a dull, relentless ache, but the grief was still raw, gnawing at her insides like a hungry beast. She pressed a hand against her belly, where her child had once grown, but now there was only emptiness. The realization that her hope, her last sliver of light in this dark world, had been violently taken from her was almost too much to bear. Outside her cage, the Davenport mansion continued to hum with life. The clinking of glasses, the sound of laughter, and the chatter of the servants preparing for yet another one of Winter's extravagant gatherings reached her ears. For them, it was just another day. For Lana, it marked the death of her dreams. As Lana lay there, staring at the ceiling, something shifted within her. The despair that had consumed her for so long began to transform into something colder, sharper, a determination that cut through the fog of pain like a knife. The Davenports had taken everything from her, her dignity, her child, her humanity. But there was one thing they hadn't taken yet, her will to survive. The basement door creaked open, and Lana quickly rolled onto her side, feigning sleep. She heard the heavy footsteps of one of the other servants coming down to drop off food for her. The tray was shoved through the bars with a metallic clatter, and then the footsteps retreated back up the stairs, leaving her alone once more. When the coast was clear, Lana sat up slowly, her body protesting every movement. She crawled to the tray and forced herself to eat the meager scraps of food. She needed her strength now more than ever. If she was going to survive this hell, she had to start thinking clearly. She needed a plan. A few days later, as she went about her chores in the mansion, Lana noticed something strange. The Davenports were nervous, on edge. Winter was snapping orders with more venom than usual, and Mark had taken to pacing in his study with the door closed, speaking in hushed tones over the phone. Even the two daughters, Olivia and Vanessa, were unusually quiet. Lana's curiosity was piqued, but she kept her head down, pretending not to notice. The Davenports were hiding something, and whatever it was, it had them rattled. That could only mean one thing: they were vulnerable. Lana's chance came one rainy evening when the household was in disarray preparing for yet another lavish party. She had been assigned to clean Mark's study, a task usually reserved for the more trusted staff. She knew she was being tested, but it was an opportunity she couldn't afford to waste. As she dusted the shelves and polished the ornate furniture, Lana's eyes darted around the room. She noticed a stack of papers carelessly left on Mark's desk, partially covered by an empty bottle of whiskey. Her heart raced as she glanced toward the door to make sure she was alone. With trembling hands, she lifted the bottle and quickly leafed through the documents. They appeared to be financial records, but buried within them were receipts for large sums of money paid to a law firm and several non-disclosure agreements. Lana's breath hitched as she realized what she was holding: evidence of Mark's attempts to silence previous maids who had dared to speak out against him. Her mind reeled. These documents were proof that Mark had a history of abuse, that she wasn't the first to suffer at his hands. And if she played her cards right, they could be her ticket out of this nightmare. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, and Lana quickly shoved the papers back into place, her heart hammering in her chest. Mark's deep voice boomed outside the door, and she barely had time to compose herself before he walked in. "What are you doing in here?" Mark's eyes narrowed as he looked her up and down. Just cleaning, sir," Lana stammered, keeping her gaze on the floor. He crossed the room in a few strides, his presence suffocating. "You better not be snooping around where you don't belong," he growled, grabbing her chin roughly and forcing her to meet his gaze. "No, sir. I wouldn't dare," Lana whispered, her heart pounding. For a moment, she thought he would strike her, but then he released her with a shove that nearly sent her sprawling. "Get out," he barked. "And remember, you're here to work, not pry into matters that don't concern you." Lana hurried out of the study, her pulse racing. She had narrowly escaped, but she had gained something valuable: knowledge. Mark was hiding something, and now she had a thread to pull. But she needed more than just a few documents if she was going to take down the Davenports. She needed proof that could expose the entire family. Over the next few days, Lana began to move cautiously but with newfound purpose. She listened more closely to the conversations of the other servants, kept her eyes peeled for anything suspicious, and most importantly, learned how to navigate the mansion's labyrinthine corridors without being seen. One evening, as she was cleaning the foyer, Lana overheard Winter and Mark arguing in hushed voices. She crept closer, hiding behind a heavy curtain. "She's becoming a problem," Winter hissed. "We can't afford another scandal." "We'll deal with her," Mark replied, his voice cold and unfeeling. "Like we did the others. No one will ever find out." Lana's blood ran cold. They were talking about her. She pressed a hand to her mouth to stifle a gasp. If she didn't act quickly, she would end up just like the other maids who had disappeared without a trace. But Lana was done being afraid. They had taken her child, but they wouldn't take her life. She would gather the evidence she needed, and when the time was right, she would expose the Davenports for the monsters they truly were. As she slipped back into the shadows of the house, Lana's resolve hardened. The Davenports thought they could break her, but they had only sharpened her determination. She would find a way to survive this nightmare, and when the time came, she would make them pay for every tear, every bruise, and every ounce of suffering they had inflicted upon her. The Davenport mansion loomed like a fortress of secrets, its grand walls and gilded rooms hiding the twisted truths that only a few knew. As Lana moved silently through the hallways, she was careful to avoid the watchful eyes of Winter and Mark. The servants, too, kept their heads down, never questioning, never challenging. But Lana was no longer just another obedient maid. She was now on a mission. That evening, the house was unusually quiet. Winter and her daughters had gone out for a charity gala, leaving Mark to brood alone in his study. The absence of the family created a rare opportunity for Lana. She had overheard Winter's threats and Mark's cold promises to deal with her, and she knew her time was running out. She had to find more evidence, something solid that could bring down the Davenports once and for all. Lana's heart pounded as she slipped down the back staircase, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpeting. The house was dark, the only light coming from the flickering sconces lining the walls. She made her way to Mark's study, where she had previously discovered the documents hinting at his past misdeeds. This time, she was determined to dig deeper. Pushing open the heavy wooden door, she entered the dimly lit room. The scent of Mark's cigars lingered in the air, mixing with the faint aroma of leather and old books. Lana moved quickly, knowing she had limited time before Mark returned. She made her way to the large mahogany desk, its surface cluttered with papers and empty glasses. Her hands trembled slightly as she rifled through the documents, searching for anything that could serve as proof of the family's crimes. Most of the papers were mundane, business contracts, invoices, letters. But then, buried beneath a stack of old files, she found something that made her blood run cold. It was a thick folder labeled "Confidential." Inside were copies of non-disclosure agreements, signed by former maids and staff members who had abruptly left the Davenport estate over the years. The agreements were accompanied by large payment receipts, hush money to keep them quiet. Lana's eyes widened as she read through the documents, her breath catching in her throat. These were the maids who had disappeared, the ones who had tried to speak up but were silenced with money or worse. And now, Lana realized, she was next on that list. But unlike the others, she would not be bought off. She would not be silenced. Lana continued to search, her movements growing more frantic. She needed something that would prove not just Mark's guilt but implicate the entire family. In the bottom drawer of the desk, hidden beneath layers of old reports, she found another folder. This one was labeled with a single name, Angela. Angela had been a maid at the Davenport mansion years ago, long before Lana arrived. She was a name that was occasionally whispered among the staff, someone who had vanished overnight, never to be heard from again. Lana's hands shook as she opened the folder, her eyes scanning the contents. Angela had not just been another maid, she had filed a police report accusing Mark of assault. But before the case could go to court, Angela had mysteriously disappeared. The last document in the folder was a letter from Winter to Mark. It was brief but chilling in its implication. "Take care of her. We can't afford another scandal. You know what to do." Lana's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the smoking gun that tied Winter to Mark's heinous crimes. But before she could process the full weight of her discovery, the study door creaked open behind her. She froze, the folder still clutched in her hands. Mark stood in the doorway, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. Lana's mind raced. She had to think quickly. I was just cleaning, sir," she stammered, trying to shove the folder back into the drawer. But it was too late. Mark's eyes had already zeroed in on the incriminating documents. "You little snoop," he hissed, crossing the room in a few quick strides. He grabbed her wrist with a bruising grip, yanking her toward him. "You think you can betray this family? After everything we've done for you?" Lana's eyes blazed with a defiance she could no longer suppress. "You haven't done anything but destroy lives," she spat, wrenching her arm free. "But you won't destroy mine." Mark's face twisted with fury, but before he could react, Lana did something she never thought she'd have the courage to do. She brought her knee up hard, connecting with his groin. Mark doubled over with a grunt of pain, and Lana took the opportunity to bolt for the door, clutching the folder to her chest. Her heart pounded as she sprinted down the hallway, her breaths coming in short, panicked gasps. She could hear Mark recovering behind her, shouting for the guards. But she had something they didn't: evidence. And now, she had to get out before they could silence her for good. Lana's mind raced as she fled through the darkened mansion. She knew she couldn't trust the police. The Davenports had them in their pockets. No, she needed to get these documents to someone who could actually expose the truth. The name of a local journalist she'd overheard in passing came to mind, someone known for exposing corruption, someone who might actually listen. But first, she had to survive the night. The house seemed to close in around her, the walls pressing in as she heard footsteps approaching from all directions. The Davenport staff would do anything to protect their masters, and Lana knew she was running out of places to hide. She slipped into a narrow hallway that led to the servants' quarters, her mind racing. She needed a plan, a way out of this house and into the hands of someone who could help. Clutching the folder to her chest, she vowed that this would not be the end. She had the proof she needed. Now, she just had to stay alive long enough to use it. Lana's breath came in ragged gasps as she crouched behind a heavy velvet curtain, clutching the stolen folder to her chest. The mansion was now alive with shouts and heavy footsteps. Mark's enraged voice barked orders as the staff searched for her. She pressed herself against the wall, her heart thundering in her chest, trying to stay as still as possible. Every second was a gamble, and she couldn't afford to get caught now. She needed time to think. The folder she held was damning, yes, but it still wasn't enough. To truly bring down the Davenports, she needed irrefutable proof that would not only expose Mark's abuse but also implicate Winter and the rest of the family. As she listened to the chaos unfolding in the hallway, a voice from the past whispered in her mind, Angela, the maid who had disappeared after accusing Mark. The weight of Angela's unfinished story hung heavy on her conscience. The voices began to fade, and Lana took the opportunity to slip out of her hiding place. She moved through the labyrinth of corridors with a newfound determination. She needed to find more evidence, and she knew exactly where to look: the room no servant was ever allowed to enter, Winter Davenport's private office. Carefully, she navigated her way through the mansion, avoiding the frantic guards. Finally, she reached the imposing double doors that led to Winter's sanctuary. It was locked, but Lana had learned a few tricks during her years of servitude. She pulled a hairpin from her pocket and set to work, her fingers trembling as she picked the lock. After a few tense moments, the door clicked open. The room was as cold and pristine as Winter herself. Everything was meticulously organized, the air tinged with the scent of expensive perfume. Lana's eyes darted around, searching for anything that might help her unravel the family's secrets. Her gaze landed on a large, ornately carved wardrobe. She opened it cautiously and found a locked compartment inside. Desperation fueled her as she pried it open with a letter opener she found on the desk. Inside, she discovered a small box filled with photographs, letters, and documents. As she flipped through the contents, her eyes widened in shock. These were not just business papers or financial records, these were the secrets that could destroy the Davenport family. Her hands shook as she came across a series of old photographs. The first few were innocent enough, pictures of Winter and Mark with their daughters, Olivia and Vanessa, as children. But as she continued flipping through them, the images grew darker. There were photos of a young maid, her face bruised and eyes hollow. Lana's blood ran cold as she recognized the girl. It was Angela. But it wasn't just Angela's face that caught Lana's attention. In one of the photographs, she saw something that made her heart stop. The young maid was pregnant, her belly swollen. And standing beside her, with his hand possessively on her shoulder, was Mark Davenport. The date scrawled on the back of the photo was over 20 years ago, long before Lana had started working for the family. As she pieced together the timeline, a horrifying realization dawned on her. Angela had been pregnant with Mark's child. But Angela's child had not disappeared, it had been raised in the Davenport household. A sound at the door jolted Lana from her thoughts. She quickly stuffed the photographs and documents into her apron pocket just as the door creaked open. Olivia Davenport, Winter's eldest daughter, stood in the doorway, her eyes wide with shock. "What are you doing in here?" she demanded, her voice trembling. Lana's mind raced. If Olivia raised the alarm, she would be caught and the evidence would be lost. But there was something in Olivia's expression, a flicker of fear, of uncertainty, that gave Lana a sliver of hope. "I know the truth," Lana said in a low, urgent whisper. "I know who your real mother is." Olivia's face paled, and for a moment, she seemed to waver. "What are you talking about?" she snapped, but there was no conviction in her voice. Lana pulled out one of the photographs and held it up. "Angela was your mother. Mark is your father. Winter isn't your real mother, she took you in to hide the scandal." Olivia's eyes darted to the photo, her expression crumbling. She stumbled back, gripping the doorframe for support. "That's a lie," she whispered, but Lana could see the truth dawning in her eyes. The carefully constructed world Winter had built was beginning to shatter. "They've been lying to you your entire life," Lana continued, pressing her advantage. "You and your sister, Vanessa, are the children of Maid's Mark assaulted. Winter took you in to cover up his crimes, to keep her perfect family image intact." Tears welled up in Olivia's eyes, but before she could respond, another voice rang out behind her. Vanessa, the younger daughter, had joined them, her face twisted in confusion. "What's going on?" she demanded, looking between her sister and Lana. Lana turned to face Vanessa, her heart racing. "You deserve to know the truth," she said, her voice steady. "You were both used to cover up your father's crimes. Winter isn't your mother. She's been keeping you in the dark to protect Mark." Vanessa's face crumpled, her bravado melting away. "No, that can't be true," she muttered, shaking her head. But Olivia's tear-streaked face told her otherwise. The air was thick with tension, but Lana knew she had to keep pushing. "Help me," she pleaded. "Help me expose them. We can take them down together." For a long moment, the sisters exchanged glances, their entire world unraveling around them. But before they could respond, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. Mark's angry voice boomed closer, barking orders at the guards. "Hide me," Lana whispered urgently. "If they find me, it's over." Without another word, Olivia grabbed Lana's arm and pulled her toward a hidden door in the corner of the room. It led to a narrow passageway that servants once used to move through the house unseen. Vanessa hesitated, then nodded, her face pale but resolute. "Go," Vanessa urged. "We'll stall him." Lana slipped into the dark passageway, her heart pounding. She had uncovered the family's darkest secret, but now she had to figure out how to use it. As she moved through the shadowy corridor, she knew one thing for certain: the Davenports' days of power were numbered. They had shattered countless lives to protect their reputation, but now the cracks were spreading. And Lana was determined to watch it all crumble. Lana's breaths came in shallow gasps as she navigated the narrow, hidden passageway. The cool stone walls seemed to close in around her, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had just uncovered one of the Davenport family's darkest secrets, and now she had allies in Olivia and Vanessa, unexpected allies, but allies nonetheless. It was a glimmer of hope she hadn't thought possible. The dim passageway eventually opened into a small storage room behind the kitchen. Lana paused to catch her breath, pressing a trembling hand against her chest. The old wooden door was slightly ajar, and through the crack, she could hear the commotion in the main house. Mark's angry shouts echoed down the hallways, and the sound of the guards' boots clattered on the marble floors. The mansion was in chaos. But despite the danger, Lana felt a newfound sense of purpose. She had managed to turn Winter's daughters against their own family, and now she had to act fast. The folder she had stolen from Winter's office contained damning evidence of Mark's history of abuse, Angela's disappearance, and the secret behind Olivia and Vanessa's true parentage. But it still wasn't enough to bring down the entire family. She needed something bigger, something that would expose the Davenports to the world and ensure they couldn't bury the truth this time. Steeling herself, Lana pushed open the door and slipped into the kitchen. The staff were distracted by Mark's frenzied orders, which gave her the cover she needed to reach the servants' quarters unnoticed. She had a plan, but it was risky. She had overheard the name of a journalist, a man who was known for exposing the secrets of the powerful. If she could get the documents to him, she might have a chance to bring the Davenports to justice. But first, she needed access to the mansion's private office network. She had seen Winter using a laptop in her bedroom suite, accessing files that weren't stored on physical paper. That laptop would have the digital proof Lana needed. As she made her way through the darkened hallways, she heard a soft whisper behind her. Turning quickly, she came face to face with Olivia. The young woman's eyes were red-rimmed, her hands shaking. "You're going after them, aren't you?" Olivia whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. Lana nodded. "I have to," she said quietly. "I can't let them get away with this. Not after everything they've done." A pained expression crossed Olivia's face. I want to help," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't stay silent anymore. If what you're saying is true, then they've been lying to me my entire life. I need to know." Lana studied Olivia's face, searching for any sign of deceit. But all she saw was fear and confusion, a young woman grappling with the harsh reality that her life had been built on lies. "All right," Lana said finally. "If you really want to help, I need access to your mother's laptop." Olivia hesitated, then nodded. "Follow me." They moved quickly and silently through the dark hallways, avoiding the guards who were still searching for Lana. The mansion seemed like a labyrinth, but Olivia knew its twists and turns better than anyone. They reached Winter's bedroom suite without being seen, and Olivia motioned for Lana to stay hidden by the door while she slipped inside. Lana's heart raced as she waited, straining to hear any sounds that might signal they had been caught. The seconds ticked by like hours until, finally, Olivia reappeared, clutching the sleek silver laptop in her hands. "Here," she whispered, thrusting it into Lana's arms. "I'll keep watch." With a quick nod of gratitude, Lana ducked into a small alcove in the hallway, her hands shaking as she opened the laptop. The screen blinked to life, and to her relief, it wasn't password protected. Winter had always been arrogant, believing herself untouchable. But that arrogance was about to be her downfall. Lana's fingers flew across the keyboard as she navigated through Winter's files. It was a treasure trove of information, confidential emails, financial transactions, and even scanned copies of legal agreements that detailed the payoffs to keep victims silent. But it was a series of recent emails that caught Lana's attention, correspondence between Winter and a high-profile judge, discussing plans to cover up Angela's disappearance. Her eyes widened as she realized the depth of the corruption. The Davenports had powerful allies in law enforcement, the judiciary, and even the media. If Lana didn't act fast, they would find a way to discredit her or make her disappear just like the others. Lana quickly copied all the files onto a flash drive she had hidden in her apron pocket. She knew this evidence could destroy the Davenport family if it reached the right hands. But just as she finished, Olivia hissed a warning. "Someone's coming." Without wasting a second, Lana snapped the laptop shut and handed it back to Olivia. "Hide it," she whispered urgently. "If they find it missing, they'll know." Olivia nodded, her face pale, and quickly returned the laptop to its place. As the sound of approaching footsteps grew louder, Lana slipped into the shadows of the alcove, her heart pounding. A moment later, Winter's icy voice filled the hallway. "Olivia, what are you doing here?" Winter demanded, her sharp eyes scanning the dim corridor. "I was looking for you, Mother," Olivia stammered. "I thought I heard something." Winter narrowed her eyes suspiciously but seemed to buy the excuse. "The search is still on for that wretched maid," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "If you see her, alert me immediately." "Yes, Mother," Olivia replied, her voice steady despite the fear that flickered in her eyes. As Winter turned and marched away, Lana let out a slow, shaky breath. She had narrowly avoided being discovered, but the clock was ticking. She had the evidence, but now she needed to get it to the journalist before the Davenports could silence her. Slipping back into the hidden passageway, Lana knew there was no turning back now. She had crossed the line, and the Davenports would stop at nothing to destroy her. But she had one thing they didn't expect: nothing left to lose. With the flash drive safely tucked away, she made her way toward the servants' entrance, where a bicycle was hidden that she could use to escape the grounds. She had to reach the journalist before the sun rose. If she could survive the night, the Davenports' empire would begin to crumble by morning. Lana pedaled furiously through the darkness, the wheels of the old bicycle rattling over the uneven dirt path. The cold night air stung her cheeks, but she pushed forward, her heart pounding in her chest. The flash drive with all the damning evidence was tucked securely in her pocket, and her mind was singularly focused on one goal: reaching the journalist who could help her expose the Davenports' crimes. The moon cast a pale light over the desolate grounds surrounding the estate, illuminating the twisted branches of the ancient oak trees that lined the path. Lana glanced over her shoulder every few seconds, expecting to see the flicker of headlights or hear the rumble of engines. The Davenports would not let her escape easily. She had dealt them a crippling blow, and they would be relentless in their pursuit. As she reached the outskirts of the Davenport property, Lana finally allowed herself a moment to breathe. She was almost free. The thought brought a surge of hope, but it was quickly extinguished by the sound of a car engine roaring to life behind her. Panic shot through her veins as she glanced back to see the glare of headlights cutting through the darkness. She veered off the main road, steering the bicycle down a narrow, overgrown path that led into the dense woods. The trees closed in around her, branches snagging at her hair and clothes. She could hear the car speeding down the main road, its engine a low growl in the distance, but it hadn't turned onto her path yet. Lana's breath came in shallow gasps as she pushed through the woods, desperate to reach the small town on the other side. The journalist's office was there, a beacon of hope in the otherwise impenetrable darkness of her life. But as she broke through the tree line and emerged onto a secluded road, she skidded to a stop, her heart nearly leaping out of her chest. Standing in the middle of the road was Camille, Winter Davenport's youngest daughter. Her eyes were wide with fear, her hands trembling as she held up a small flashlight. "Lana, wait!" Camille called out, her voice a mixture of urgency and desperation. Lana's instincts screamed at her to keep going. Camille was a Davenport, part of the family that had tortured her. But something in the girl's eyes made her hesitate. "What do you want?" Lana demanded, her voice harsh and distrustful. Camille took a cautious step forward, lowering the flashlight. "I'm not here to stop you," she said quickly, her voice trembling. I want to help." Lana's eyes narrowed. "Why should I trust you? Your mother and father would kill me if they found me right now." Camille's face crumpled, tears pooling in her eyes. "I know," she whispered. "But I've seen the things they've done. To you, to the others. I can't pretend anymore. Please, just listen to me." Lana hesitated, torn between distrust and the faintest glimmer of hope. She had no allies, no one she could truly trust in this fight. But Camille's tears seemed genuine, and Lana knew the risk she was taking by being out here, alone, in the dead of night. "Fine," Lana said finally. "But if you're lying to me, I swear." "I'm not," Camille interrupted, her voice breaking. "I know about the files. The ones you found in my mother's office. But there's more, much more. My mother has a secret safe in her study, behind the portrait. It has all the original documents, the ones they couldn't risk digitizing." Lana's breath caught in her throat. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Because I want out," Camille said, her voice urgent. "I can't live in that house anymore, surrounded by their lies. I know you're planning to expose them, and I want to help. But you need everything. If you go to the authorities now, they'll just buy their way out of it. You need what's in that safe." Lana's mind whirled with the implications. Camille was right. Without the original documents, the Davenports' lawyers could easily discredit the digital copies she had stolen. But going back into the mansion was a risk she couldn't afford to take. "How can I trust you?" Lana asked, her eyes searching Camille's face. "You can't," Camille admitted, her shoulders slumping. "But I'm begging you, Lana. I don't want to end up like my sister. I don't want to be a pawn in their twisted games anymore." Lana studied her, the weight of the decision pressing down on her like a crushing force. Every instinct told her to run, to take what she had and get out while she still could. But the desperation in Camille's eyes mirrored the desperation Lana had felt for so long. Maybe, just maybe, this was the break she needed. "All right," Lana said finally, the words tasting like lead on her tongue. "But if you betray me, I'll make sure they go down, and you with them." Camille nodded fervently, relief washing over her face. "I swear, I'm on your side," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Meet me at the greenhouse at midnight. I'll get you inside." Without another word, Lana turned her bike around and pedaled back toward the mansion, her mind racing. She knew this could be a trap, that Camille could be leading her straight into the jaws of the Davenports' wrath. But if there was a chance, however small, that she could get the original documents, it was a risk she had to take. As she approached the estate, she kept to the shadows, slipping through the trees until she reached the edge of the sprawling grounds. The greenhouse loomed ahead, a dark silhouette against the starless sky. True to her word, Camille was waiting, nervously glancing around to make sure they hadn't been followed. "This way," Camille whispered, leading Lana through a hidden entrance behind the greenhouse. "We'll go through the servants' corridor. It's the only way to reach the study without being seen." Lana nodded, her heart thudding in her chest. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. With Camille's help, she might finally have the evidence she needed to bring the Davenports down. But as they slipped into the darkened mansion, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking straight into the lion's den. The ticking clock was louder than ever, and with every step they took, the stakes rose higher. The Davenports had played their game of power for years, crushing anyone who stood in their way. But tonight, Lana was determined to change the rules. Lana moved silently through the dimly lit hallway, her heart pounding as she followed closely behind Camille. The mansion was eerily quiet at this late hour, with most of the guards stationed outside, still searching the grounds. But Lana knew it wouldn't be long before Mark realized she was no longer on the run and had doubled back. Every minute counted. Camille's hands trembled as she led Lana through a hidden servants' corridor that twisted behind the mansion's walls. "It's not far," Camille whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "Just stay close." Lana nodded, her grip tightening around the small flashlight Camille had given her. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was a trap. Trusting a Davenport, even one as seemingly desperate as Camille, felt like signing her own death warrant. But the thought of that secret safe and the original documents it held was too tempting to pass up. If Camille was telling the truth, this was Lana's best chance to bring the entire family down. They reached the end of the corridor, where a narrow staircase led up into darkness. Camille gestured for Lana to follow her, and they ascended cautiously, each step creaking ominously. At the top of the stairs was a heavy wooden door. Camille paused, pressing her ear against it before slowly turning the handle. Lana held her breath as they slipped into Winter Davenport's study. The room was bathed in shadows, the moonlight streaming through the tall windows casting an ethereal glow over the polished furniture. The air was thick with the scent of winter's perfume, a sharp, cold scent that sent a shiver down Lana's spine. Camille wasted no time. She crossed the room to the large portrait of Winter that hung above the fireplace. With a quick glance at Lana, she pushed the frame to the side, revealing a hidden safe embedded in the wall. "This is it," Camille whispered, her voice barely audible. "The code is my sister's birthday, July 17, 1999. Lana's fingers fumbled as she punched in the numbers, her heart racing. Each beep of the keypad echoed like a drumbeat in the silent room. When she hit the final digit, there was a soft click, and the safe door swung open. Inside were stacks of documents, folders, and several flash drives. Lana's eyes widened as she sifted through the papers. There were detailed records of Mark's payoffs, photographs, and legal agreements, irrefutable evidence of the family's crimes. But the most damning document was a letter from Winter to the judge she had seen referenced earlier. It explicitly detailed payments made to silence victims and the authorities who had covered it up. "This is it," Lana whispered, her voice trembling with relief. "This will destroy them." Camille nodded, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. "You need to get out of here before they realize what's happening," she urged. "I'll cover for you." Lana turned to thank her, but the words caught in her throat as the study door burst open. Mark stood in the doorway, his face twisted with fury. Behind him were two burly guards, their expressions grim. "You little traitor," he snarled at Camille. "Did you really think you could betray your own family?" Lana's blood turned to ice. She had been so focused on the documents that she hadn't heard them approach. Camille's face went pale, but she stepped in front of Lana, shielding her with her body. "I won't let you hurt her," Camille said, her voice shaking but resolute. Mark's eyes flicked to Lana, his lips curling into a cruel smile. "You think you've won, don't you?" he sneered. "You think anyone will believe the word of a lowly maid over a family like ours?" Lana's heart pounded as she backed away, clutching the stack of documents to her chest. "This is over, Mark," she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. "I have proof of everything, your crimes, Winter's involvement, the payoffs. Once I get these to the press, your empire will crumble." Mark's eyes narrowed. "You won't make it out of this house alive," he growled, motioning for the guards to advance. But before they could reach her, Camille sprang into action. She grabbed a heavy brass candlestick from the mantel and swung it at one of the guards, catching him off guard. "Run, Lana!" Camille screamed. "Get out of here now!" The room erupted into chaos. Lana bolted for the door, clutching the documents as if her life depended on it, because it did. She heard the sound of fists meeting flesh, Camille's cries as she struggled against the guards, and Mark's enraged shouts. But Lana couldn't stop. She sprinted down the hallway, her only thought to escape the mansion with the evidence she had risked everything to obtain. Her feet flew over the plush carpets, the sounds of pursuit hot on her heels. She turned corner after corner, desperately trying to reach the servants' entrance at the back of the house. But as she rounded the final corner, she skidded to a stop, her heart sinking. Winter stood there, flanked by 2 more guards, her cold eyes gleaming with triumph. "Well, well," Winter said, her voice dripping with venom. "I always knew you were more trouble than you were worth, Lana." Lana's mind raced. She was trapped, surrounded on all sides. But she wasn't ready to give up, not after coming this far. In a last-ditch effort, she turned and darted toward the nearest window. Without hesitation, she smashed the glass with her elbow and threw herself through the jagged shards. The night air hit her like a shock as she tumbled onto the gravel below, pain shooting through her arm where the glass had cut deep. But she couldn't stop. Ignoring the searing pain, she scrambled to her feet and sprinted toward the dense woods that bordered the estate. Behind her, she could hear Winter's shrill screams and Mark's furious orders, but the darkness was on her side now. She slipped into the cover of the trees, her breaths coming in ragged gasps as she pushed through the underbrush. The documents were still clutched tightly to her chest, a lifeline that could save her and destroy the Davenports. The chase was far from over, but for now, she had a slim chance. She had to reach the journalist, get these documents into the right hands. If she could do that, she might have a fighting chance to take down the family that had stolen everything from her. Her body ached, blood trickled down her arm, but the thought of justice, of finally ending the Davenports' reign of terror, kept her moving. She would not stop. Not now. Not until she had exposed every single one of their sins to the world. Lana's heart pounded as she ran deeper into the woods, the sound of dogs barking in the distance spurring her forward. The dense branches clawed at her skin, and the cuts on her arm throbbed with every movement, but she couldn't afford to slow down. She clutched the precious documents against her chest, knowing that they were the only thing standing between her and a lifetime of silence, or worse. The cold night air burned in her lungs as she forced her legs to keep moving. The moon, now hidden behind clouds, offered little light, making it nearly impossible to see where she was going. Every step felt like it could be her last. But the thought of Mark's enraged face and Winter's cold, calculating eyes pushed her forward. She had to survive. She had to get these papers to the journalist. She had nearly reached the edge of the woods when she stumbled upon an old, crumbling stone structure, an abandoned warehouse she remembered seeing from her rare trips to town with the Davenports. It was mostly hidden by overgrown vines, a relic from a time long forgotten. The barking of the dogs was getting closer, and she could hear the shouts of the guards echoing through the trees. She had no choice. Lana slipped inside through a gap in the broken door, her eyes adjusting to the darkness. The air was thick with dust, and the floor was covered in debris, but it was shelter. She crouched behind a pile of old crates, pressing her back against the cold stone wall as she tried to catch her breath. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe she had lost them. But that hope was shattered when she heard the crunch of footsteps outside the warehouse. Panic surged through her. They had tracked her here. She had mere seconds to think. Her eyes darted around the dark space, searching for an escape route. Then she noticed a rusty metal grate on the floor, a hidden entrance to an underground tunnel system that was rumored to stretch beneath the town. Without hesitation, she pried the grate open and squeezed through the narrow opening, lowering herself into the darkness below. The tunnel was damp and cold, the air thick with the smell of mold and decay. It was pitch black, but Lana forced herself to move forward, her hands feeling along the slimy walls to guide her way. She couldn't hear the guards anymore, but she knew better than to let her guard down. The Davenports wouldn't stop until they had her. The tunnel twisted and turned, and Lana struggled to keep her bearings. Her legs ached, and the cuts on her arms stung with every brush against the rough stone walls. But she kept moving, driven by the thought of the documents she held. They were her last hope, the key to ending the Davenport family's reign of terror. After what felt like hours, Lana saw a faint glimmer of light ahead. Relief washed over her as she realized she had found the exit. But just as she was about to reach it, she heard voices, men talking in low, urgent tones. She pressed herself against the tunnel wall, straining to hear. Mark's orders were clear, one of the voices said. We need to find her before she gets to the town. If she reaches that journalist, it's over. Lana's blood ran cold. They had figured out her plan. Mark was using every resource he had to stop her, and she was running out of time. She would have to think fast if she wanted to make it out of this alive. Taking a deep breath, Lana waited until the voices faded away. Then, using every ounce of strength she had left, she sprinted toward the exit. She emerged into the open air, her eyes stinging from the sudden brightness of the moonlight. The town was still a few miles away, but she could see the faint glow of streetlights in the distance. She was so close. But as she started down the road, her hope was dashed by the roar of an approaching engine. A black SUV barreled toward her, its headlights slicing through the darkness. Lana's heart skipped a beat. There was no way she could outrun a car. Desperation clawed at her, but she refused to give up. Spotting a narrow alleyway to her right, Lana darted into it just as the SUV skidded to a halt. She could hear the slamming of car doors, the heavy footsteps of the guards as they fanned out to search for her. She pressed herself into the shadows, praying they wouldn't find her. The sound of footsteps drew closer, and Lana's pulse quickened. She could see the glint of flashlights sweeping the area, inching closer to where she was hiding. Her mind raced. If they caught her, it would be the end, not just for her, but for any hope of exposing the Davenports. Just when she thought all was lost, a hand grabbed her wrist, yanking her deeper into the shadows. Lana bit back a scream, but then she heard a familiar whisper. "It's me," Camille hissed. "Stay quiet." Lana's eyes widened. "Camille? How did you find me?" "There's no time to explain," Camille said urgently. "We have to move before they see us." Together, they slipped through the dark alleyways, using the narrow backstreets to avoid the guards. Camille led Lana to a rundown building at the edge of town, its windows boarded up and its exterior covered in graffiti. "We'll hide here for now," Camille whispered as she pushed open the door. Inside, the building was dark and musty, but it offered safety, at least for the moment. Lana leaned against the wall, her legs trembling with exhaustion. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Camille's eyes were filled with determination. "Because I'm tired of living under their control," she said. "I've seen what they've done to you, to so many others. I can't be a part of it anymore." Lana stared at her, searching for any sign of deception, but all she saw was sincerity. "Thank you," Lana said quietly, her voice choked with emotion. "But we still have to reach the journalist. If we don't, everything we've done will be for nothing." Camille nodded. "We'll wait until dawn," she said. "They'll ease up their search by then. I know a way through the back streets that will get you to the newspaper office unnoticed." As they huddled together in the darkness, waiting for the first light of dawn, Lana allowed herself a moment of hope. With Camille's help, they just might make it. And when they did, the Davenports would finally face the consequences of their cruelty. But deep down, Lana knew that the most dangerous part of her journey was still ahead. The Davenports wouldn't go down without a fight, and she was about to risk everything to expose them. The first light of dawn seeped through the cracks in the boarded-up windows of the rundown building where Lana and Camille had taken refuge. The cold air chilled them to the bone, but it was nothing compared to the icy dread gnawing at Lana's insides. Today would decide everything. She either exposed the Davenports for the monsters they were, or she would vanish like so many others who had crossed them. Lana turned to Camille, whose eyes were red from lack of sleep. "Are you sure about this?" Lana asked, her voice a whisper. "If they find out you helped me, they'll come after you too. Camille nodded resolutely. I'm tired of living in fear, she said. If I don't do something now, I'll be just as guilty as they are. There was a fire in Camille's eyes that Lana hadn't seen before, a spark of rebellion that made her seem stronger, braver. The streets outside were slowly coming to life as the town began to wake up. It was now or never. Clutching the flash drive and documents tightly, Lana and Camille slipped out of their hiding place, keeping to the shadows as they made their way toward the newspaper office. The plan was simple: reach the office, hand the evidence to the journalist Lana had been in contact with, and let the truth spread like wildfire. But getting there would not be easy. The Davenports would have their men patrolling the streets, searching for any sign of her. As they turned a corner, the town square came into view. The morning fog clung to the cobblestone streets, making it difficult to see too far ahead. Camille paused, scanning the area. The newspaper office is just down that street, she whispered, pointing to a brick building with a faded sign. Lana nodded, her pulse quickening. Let's go. We need to move before anyone spots us. They hurried down the narrow street, but just as they reached the corner, the sound of engines roared behind them. Lana's heart sank. A black SUV turned into the square, its headlights sweeping over the buildings. They found us, Lana hissed. Without hesitation, Camille grabbed Lana's arm and pulled her into a small alleyway. This way, she urged. They darted through the twisting alleys, their footsteps echoing off the walls. But the SUV screeched to a halt, and the sound of doors slamming and boots hitting the pavement told Lana that the guards were already on their trail. Over here, Camille whispered, leading Lana into the back entrance of a coffee shop. The scent of fresh pastries and brewed coffee filled the air, a stark contrast to the tension that hung between them. The shop was empty, save for the owner who was just opening up. He looked up in surprise as they burst in, but Camille quickly flashed him a pleading look. Please, Camille whispered. We just need to get through to the other side. The shop owner hesitated for a moment, but something in Camille's eyes convinced him. All right, go. But hurry, he said, gesturing toward a side door that led to another alley. Thank you, Lana whispered as they rushed through, slipping out into the narrow street behind the shop. The newspaper office was only a few blocks away now, but the sound of shouting guards was getting closer. We're almost there, Camille panted. We just need to make it to the next block. But as they rounded the corner, they came face to face with a group of guards. Mark Davenport stood at the center, his eyes blazing with fury. End of the line, Lana, he growled, his lips curling into a cruel smile. Lana's heart dropped, but she refused to show fear. It's over, Mark, she said, holding up the flash drive. I have everything I need to bring you down. Mark's eyes flickered with something like panic, but he quickly masked it with rage. You really think anyone will believe a maid over me? He sneered. You'll be dead before they even get a chance to see what's on that drive. Camille stepped forward, positioning herself between Lana and her father. No, father, she said, her voice trembling but resolute. This ends now. You can't keep silencing people forever. Mark's face twisted in fury. You ungrateful little, but before he could finish, Lana made her move. In one swift motion, she pulled out a small device from her pocket and pressed a button. Smile for the camera, Lana said, her voice filled with defiance. She had been streaming their entire conversation live to social media using the phone hidden in her pocket. The shocked expressions of Mark and his guards were priceless as they realized the trap they had walked into. You think you're clever? Mark spat, his face contorted with rage. This won't save you. Lana met his gaze, her eyes blazing with determination. No, but it will save everyone you've hurt, she shot back. The world knows what you are now. Mark lunged forward, but Camille and Lana were already sprinting toward the newspaper office. The guards hesitated, unsure whether to chase after them or deal with the fallout of the live stream that was spreading like wildfire across social media. As they burst into the office, the journalist, a grizzled man with salt and pepper hair, looked up in surprise. "You must be Lana," he said, his eyes widening at the sight of the flash drive and the documents she held out to him. "There's no time," Lana gasped. "You have to publish this. It has everything, proof of the Davenports' crimes, the payoffs, the assaults." The journalist nodded, already slipping the flash drive into his computer. "I've been waiting for something like this," he said. "Once this goes live, they won't be able to hide anymore." Lana slumped into a chair, her entire body trembling with relief. She had done it. She had reached the finish line. Camille stood beside her, her eyes filled with tears. "It's over," Camille whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We did it." But Lana knew it wasn't truly over. The Davenports would fight back with everything they had. But now, the world knew the truth. And for the first time, Lana felt the weight of her chains begin to lift. The journalist turned to her, his eyes gleaming with determination. "This is going to change everything," he said. "You've just brought down one of the most powerful families in the country." Lana nodded, exhaustion washing over her like a wave. "It's about time," she whispered. "They've gotten away with it for far too long." As the first rays of morning sunlight streamed through the office windows, Lana finally allowed herself a moment of hope. She had fought, she had survived, and now, the world would finally see the Davenports for who they truly were. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden glow over the town as the world woke up to the news that was spreading like wildfire. Lana sat in the newspaper office, the tension in the room thick as she watched the journalist frantically work at his computer. He was uploading the files and documents she had risked everything to retrieve, ensuring that the world would know the truth. The video stream Lana had set up in the confrontation with Mark had gone viral. Social media platforms were exploding with views, comments, and shares as the public reacted to the explosive revelations about the Davenport family. The world was finally seeing the monsters behind the polished smiles. Camille hovered nearby, her eyes glued to the television screen mounted on the wall, which was already broadcasting the breaking news. The anchor's voice filled the room, recounting the shocking allegations against the Davenports, accompanied by clips of the live stream Lana had broadcasted. These documents reveal a network of payoffs, corruption, and abuse orchestrated by one of the town's most prominent families, the anchor said, her voice shaking with emotion. Lana could hardly believe it. For years, she had been trapped, silenced, and brutalized by the Davenports, but now their secrets were laid bare for the world to see. Her hands were still trembling, and her heart was racing, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she allowed herself a flicker of hope. It was almost over. They were so close. But just as relief began to wash over her, the door to the office burst open. Lana turned, her heart leaping into her throat. Mark Davenport stormed in, his face a mask of rage, flanked by 2 armed guards. The journalist froze, his hands hovering over the keyboard, but Mark's eyes were locked on Lana. "You think you can destroy me with a few documents?" Mark hissed, advancing toward her. His voice was low, dangerous, like a predator cornering its prey. "You think anyone will believe a maid over a Davenport?" Lana's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to stand her ground. She could see the wild desperation in Mark's eyes. He was a man with nothing left to lose. "The truth is out, Mark," she said, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "You can't silence me anymore. The world knows what you are." Mark's lips curled into a cruel smile. "You think this is over? I have more power than you can imagine," he spat. He turned to the guards. "Take her," he barked, his voice like a whip cracking through the air. Camille stepped forward, her voice shaking but filled with resolve. "Father, stop this. It's over. You can't keep hurting people to protect yourself. Mark's head snapped toward Camille, his eyes narrowing. You, he growled. You're the one who betrayed us. He lunged at Camille, but Lana quickly stepped between them, holding up her phone, its camera pointed directly at Mark. Smile for the camera, Mark, Lana said, her voice cold. You're live again. The world is watching. For a moment, Mark froze, his face contorted in shock. The guards hesitated, unsure whether to advance. Behind them, the journalist had already resumed typing, broadcasting the scene live. Every word, every action was being streamed to thousands of viewers who were hanging on to every second. You're bluffing, Mark snarled, but Lana could see the uncertainty flicker in his eyes. No, I'm not, she replied, taking a step closer. Everyone's watching you right now. If you so much as touch me or Camille, it's all on record. Mark's face twisted with rage, but he seemed to realize he was trapped. The guards exchanged nervous glances, their grips on their weapons loosening. The tension in the room was suffocating, the air thick with anticipation. Finally, Mark's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. For the first time, Lana saw a flicker of defeat in his eyes. But just when Lana thought he was backing down, Winter Davenport burst into the room, her eyes wild with fury. What are you all standing around for? She screamed at the guards. Grab them. Destroy that footage. Lana's heart skipped a beat. Winter was like a force of nature, her presence filling the room with an almost palpable rage. She turned on Camille, her expression a mask of betrayal. You're no daughter of mine, Winter hissed. You chose them over your own family? Camille's eyes filled with tears, but she stood her ground. I chose the truth, she said, her voice breaking. I can't be a part of your lies anymore. In the chaos, Lana saw her chance. She whispered urgently to the journalist. Send the files, now. He nodded and hit a final key. The computer screen flashed as the files were sent to multiple news outlets across the country. There was no turning back now. Even if Winter and Mark destroyed this office, it was too late. The evidence was already out in the world, spreading like wildfire. Realizing what had just happened, Winter's face twisted in horror. No, she whispered, her voice cracking. You've ruined everything. Lana turned to face her captors, her fear replaced with a steely resolve. No, Winter, she said, her voice ringing with conviction. You ruined yourselves. All I did was show the world who you really are. At that moment, the sound of sirens filled the air, growing louder as police cars screeched to a halt outside the building. The guards looked panicked, their eyes darting between Mark, Winter, and the door. The walls were closing in on the Davenports, and they knew it. Everyone down on the ground, an officer shouted as the door burst open. The room erupted into chaos as armed police swarmed in, their guns trained on Mark and Winter. In the confusion, Mark lunged at Lana one last time, but a police officer tackled him to the ground. Winter screamed in fury as she was handcuffed, her perfect world crumbling around her. The guards surrendered without a fight, their loyalty to the Davenports evaporating in the face of overwhelming force. As the officers led the Davenports away, Camille turned to Lana, her face streaked with tears. We did it, she whispered, her voice a mixture of disbelief and relief. It's really over. Lana nodded, her body trembling with exhaustion. It's over, she said, letting the words sink in. The nightmare that had consumed her life for so long was finally coming to an end. But as she watched the Davenports being taken away, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The world now knew the truth, but the fight for justice was far from over. For the first time in years, Lana felt the weight of her chains fall away. And for the first time, she was free. Lana stood outside the courthouse, her eyes squinting against the bright sunlight that bathed the building in a golden glow. It had been 3 months since the Davenports' empire came crashing down, and the city had not been the same since. Reporters and onlookers crowded the steps, jostling to catch a glimpse of the disgraced family being escorted inside for their final sentencing. The trial had been swift, thanks to the overwhelming evidence Lana and Camille had brought to light. Mark and Winter Davenport, once untouchable figures in high society, were now nothing more than criminals facing a laundry list of charges: corruption, abuse, bribery, and the cover-up of countless assaults. For Lana, this moment was surreal, a culmination of years of suffering and a testament to her will to survive. Camille stood beside her, looking both relieved and nervous. She had been called to testify against her own parents, a decision that had torn her apart but ultimately freed her from the chains of her family's toxic legacy. Today, they would hear the final verdict. "Are you ready?" Camille asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lana turned to her, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I've been ready for this my entire life," she replied. As they made their way up the courthouse steps, reporters swarmed around them, shouting questions and thrusting microphones into their faces. But Lana kept her head high, refusing to let the chaos faze her. This was her moment, the one she had fought so hard for. She would not let it be tainted by the noise of the media. Inside, the courtroom was packed. The air buzzed with anticipation as the judge took his seat and called the room to order. The Davenports sat at the defense table, their once proud faces now gaunt and hollow. Mark's eyes were sunken, his hands trembling slightly as he fidgeted with his tie. Winter, for the first time, looked truly broken, her cold composure replaced with a haunted emptiness. The prosecutor rose, presenting the final statements. "Your Honor, the evidence speaks for itself," she said firmly. "The Davenports have used their wealth and influence to cover up their crimes for years. But today, they must answer for their actions. We ask for the maximum sentence, not only for justice but to ensure that no one else suffers at their hands." Lana listened intently, her heart pounding as the judge leaned forward. This was it. The moment she had been waiting for. "The court finds the defendants, Mark and Winter Davenport, guilty on all charges," the judge announced, his voice echoing through the silent courtroom. "You are hereby sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole." A collective gasp filled the room, followed by a flurry of whispers. Lana's knees nearly gave out as the weight of the words hit her. It was over. Truly, finally over. She felt tears sting her eyes but held them back. She wouldn't give the Davenports the satisfaction of seeing her cry, even if they were tears of relief. As Mark and Winter were led away in handcuffs, Camille turned to Lana, her voice shaking with emotion. "We did it," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We really did it." Lana nodded, her own eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Yeah," she said softly. "We did." The days that followed were a whirlwind. The news of the Davenports' downfall sent shockwaves through the community. The once powerful family's allies abandoned them, their businesses collapsed, and the lavish mansion that had been a symbol of their wealth was seized by the state. But for Lana, the end of the trial was only the beginning of a new chapter in her life. She found herself standing at the gates of the Davenport mansion one last time. The grand estate that had once been her prison was now a hollow shell, its opulence marred by emptiness. Camille had invited her to see it one final time before the property was auctioned off. "I thought you might want some closure," Camille said softly as they walked through the dusty hallways. Lana's footsteps echoed as they moved through the rooms where she had once been tormented. The memories were still vivid, but they no longer held the same power over her. The fear, the pain, the humiliation, she had survived it all. And now, she was free. They stopped in front of the dog cage where Lana had spent so many nights. It was rusted and empty, just like the souls of those who had put her there. She reached out, touching the cold metal bars one last time. "I'm not afraid anymore," she whispered, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips. Camille watched her with admiration. "You're the bravest person I know, Lana," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Lana turned to her, a new light in her eyes. "I've been broken, beaten, and betrayed, but I'm still standing. That's something no one can take away from me," she replied. "But I want more than survival now. I want to help others who've suffered like I did." Camille nodded. "What are you planning to do?" "I'm starting a foundation," Lana said with determination. "To support victims of abuse, to help them find justice and rebuild their lives. No one should go through what I did without hope." Camille's eyes widened in admiration. "I want to help," she said earnestly. "I owe it to you, to everyone who was hurt by my family." Together, they began laying the groundwork for the foundation. The news of Lana's initiative spread quickly, attracting donors, volunteers, and survivors who were inspired by her story. The foundation became a beacon of hope, a symbol of resilience for those who had been silenced for too long. 6 months later, Lana found herself standing on a stage at a fundraising gala for the foundation. The room was filled with people who had come to support her cause, to hear the story of the maid who had taken down one of the most powerful families in the country. She adjusted the microphone, taking a deep breath as she looked out at the crowd. "Thank you all for being here," Lana began, her voice steady and strong. "For so long, I was trapped in a nightmare, silenced by those who believed their power made them untouchable. But today, I stand before you, not as a victim, but as a survivor. And together, we will ensure that no one else is silenced, that no one else is forced to endure what I went through." The room erupted in applause, and Lana felt a swell of emotion as she scanned the crowd. Camille stood in the front row, clapping with tears in her eyes. The journalist who had helped her sat nearby, nodding with pride. This was her new family, people who believed in justice, in hope, in change. As the applause died down, Lana stepped off the stage, her heart light for the first time in years. Camille rushed forward to embrace her, and for a moment, they simply held each other, two women who had defied the odds and found a way to heal. "You've changed so many lives," Camille whispered. "And you've changed mine." Lana smiled, a single tear sliding down her cheek. "We've changed each other," she said softly. "And this is just the beginning." As the night wore on and the guests mingled, Lana slipped outside to catch a breath of fresh air. The stars sparkled overhead, and for the first time, she felt truly at peace. The chains that had once bound her were gone, replaced with a newfound strength and a purpose that burned brighter than ever. She had taken down the Davenports. But more importantly, she had found herself. The past would always be a part of her, but it no longer defined her. Lana Davis was no longer a broken woman caged by fear and cruelty. She was a survivor, a fighter, and now, a beacon of hope for others who had been forced into the darkness. And as she stood there beneath the stars, Lana knew that this was her new beginning, a life filled with freedom, justice, and the promise of a better tomorrow.